Did you know that 1 in 8 kids in Atlanta will go hungry tonight? Eating healthy, balanced meals is essential for kids to learn and grow. That's why Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield and education nonprofit Common Threads have teamed up to help schools learn about healthier food preparation. In Atlanta, they're joined by the Dream and will provide education, recipes, and knowledge to students and families about healthier options. Visit anthem.com/dream to learn more. Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield is the trade name of Blue Cross Blue Shield Healthcare Plan of Georgia, Inc.
Hey everybody, you all know what time it is. Yes, once again, it's time for Typology, the podcast on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and actually of the whole human adventure through the lens of the Enneagram. I'm joined by my esteemed friend, Anthony Skinner.
Ian Cron, glad to be here with you. Super excited about our guest today.
I am super stoked about our guest today. By the way, as you know, Anthony, I'm coming to you live from Typology Studios in downtown San Francisco, where I am presently in the fog and looking forward to the warmth of this conversation with our new friend, Enneagram 3. Enneagram 3,
Nice.
Artist, musician, filmmaker, actor, Joel Smallbone. Welcome to the show.
I've been saving these statements, Ian, for this moment. I get asked to do these sorts of things, as you do, a good amount. And this might take the cake for the podcast. I'm not just saying this. You can check with our office. The one that I sort of leaped out of my chair when it came across. And I'll explain why. Because years ago, my wife and I have been married for 11 years. And in the fall of 2017, we're both musicians. We were eating sushi. And I said, darling, haven't we done great this year? We were about 4.5 years into marriage, 5 years into marriage. I said, haven't we done great? Like, I've flown everywhere to meet you. I've checked all the boxes. And she looked at me and she said, I just don't really feel like we've been connecting, Joel. Now, this is pre-Enneagram understanding. And I was like, it was classic, like, how could you? I checked all the boxes. I did all the things. And so at the beginning of 2018, we were planning a trip down to Australia. And she was like, I know we're going to Australia. I'm a little nervous about the trip. Well, on that trip, we read Road Back to You, cover to cover. I read it aloud to her, every word of it, aloud to her on that trip. And there is a very few books in my life that have shifted so many dynamics in my brain within the span of 300 pages. And so I'm really thrilled to be speaking to you both today.
Well, that is wonderful, and thank you so much for that. And we're thrilled to have you here and to explore all manner of things and know you better. And what is your wife's type?
Well, so this is what's crazy. So nature versus nurture, right? This is the classic question. I tested pretty equally as a 1, a 3, and an 8. Mm-hmm. Now, my dad is an 8, so I would argue if I'm self-diagnosing that I natured my way into the 8, or nurtured my way into the 8 rather than natured my way into it. And she sort of tested similarly, interestingly, with probably a higher point on the 7. But I actually think we're both 3s. I just think our wings are like, I think I swing into a 2 and she swings into a 3. But I could argue equally that I'm a 1 because the way I look through life is sort of through a level of perfectionism tendencies. So I was hoping you would solve this riddle for me in the next 30 minutes, Ian.
Well, we might. Who knows? We'll find out. We'll find out. I mean, look, so much of what determines type, right, is one's core motivations, right?
Right.
And
right.
Those motivations through most of life is our unconscious drivers that govern our lives from the shadows. And one might say for the 3 that 3s are typically very image conscious. They are affable, charismatic, very proactive, future-oriented people who have a need to succeed to achieve, to accomplish task, and they are very goal oriented. So there's this need to succeed, to appear successful to others, and to avoid failure, right? In their most unhealthy state, you might say that a 3 confuses achievement and accomplishment with love. And so there's this drive to achieve, and it's almost like apart from like a 3 before they've done some work might believe that people only value who they are for what they achieve rather than for who they are inside. Yeah. So that's very 3-ish. Now,
Okay,
1.
I will confirm. I think that I'm a 3 then. But carry on. You
Don't need to go any further. Okay.
Go no further.
Now, but remember, you contain all 9 types, right? So it's just 1 is dominant. Like I'm a 4, and I'm connected to 1. So I have a very strong inner critic. I'm very perfectionistic about writing, about my artistic and creative expression. I could care less what my car looks like. Like I'm not worried about things like that. It's not across the board.
Ian, I care about what everything looks like.
All right. Well,
yeah.
And if you care about what it looks like because everything is a reflection of you, that would be very 3-ish.
But see, then I would say, but I care about what everything looks like because I believe there is a perfect form of each thing. Like there's not multiple selections. It's not like if I wanted to pick this flooring, this is the best flooring I could pick.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's about aesthetics.
Right.
That sounds more like a 3 with a strong 4 wing.
Yeah.
I could see that. I could see that.
So this is
just one of the things we talk about between the 4 and the 1. If it is a strong 4 wing, the 4 pursues the ideal, and 1 pursues perfection, and they can really look similar. You going for the ideal could you could confuse that with perfection.
Yeah. So for 3s, oftentimes the things that they have are reflections of their success, right? At times. And for the unhealthy 3, sometimes it's signaling success, right? Or accomplishment. Like I have these floors because I have been successful at what I do. If you have a 4 wing, it gets a little more murky because it's also like, and I have these floors because they are the platonic ideal of all floors.
That's it. That's it. It's not none of this. I don't actually feel like any of this is a reflection of like my accomplishment as much as it is like I have surveyed all floors in the world, and this is the great hardwood floor for me.
Yes.
Yes, I understand. I understand this. As a 4, I understand that. And if you have a strong 4 wing, and remember, these things are on like almost a color wheel, like kind of continuum. So, is there such a thing as the ultimate 3 without any sort of coloring from the 4 and the 2? No, that doesn't really exist, right? Like, so there's a continuum here, and it's a very dynamic system, But we have now established that you're a 3, so that's a good thing without my having to go into 1s and 8s. And like I said, like there are plenty of times that cut me off on traffic on the 101, and suddenly you'll find out if I'm, you'll find out that I have some 8 in me. Like it's.
Oh yeah.
So again, it's just knowing where we default and click most of the time.
Now, am I mistaken, or so? We just focus on my dad for a minute because I'm in partnership with my dad. I've worked with my dad since I was a boy. And David Smallbone walks into a room and he looks at the room in a whole different way than Joel Smallbone as he walks into the room. Joel Smallbone walks into the room and goes, "You're feeling something. You're happy. You're sad. You're upset. You've got a problem with me." David Smallbone walks into a room and goes, "This is a great room. I love this room." And so he would walk into a room and he would say something or he would do something that I would self-interpret, and I'd go, well, if I did that, and by the way, it can be the right thing to do, strong, firm, bold statement thing, a world changer type moment. But if, as an empath, I looked at it and I went, gee whiz, I'd have to go to a really dark place to do something like that. And so before the Enneagram, I was super lazy with my personality types because I filtered every personality type, including my wife, by the way, going back to 2017, through this notion of my motivations are driving everyone else around. So everyone else should care about this flaw. Everyone else should care about the fact that that person has a problem with me or that person not. Like, and it was when, again, it was wrote back to you when I read it and I went, oh my goodness, Dad's brain, like he's just thinking it's not better or worse. He's just thinking he's on a completely different frequency wavelength than I am. The most similar way I can put it in filmmaking terms is a studio CEO said this to me. He said, we 10 people read a script and they all sit in a boardroom and they green light the movie, which basically means they release funding for the movie to be made. The trouble is they have greenlit 10 different movies because all 10 of them imagined through their lens of reality a completely different film to be made. It's like that's all of a sudden it opened my eyes to going, wow, sounds very self-indulgent, but there's more types of humans out there other than just me.
Yes. Yeah. I used to say to people all the time, we're all looking at the same screen watching a different movie. And that is really true. So when your dad walks into a room, every type has a focus of attention. So when your dad walks into a room, your dad's attention, and it's really important to know where your attention tends to migrate habitually, right? Like, really smart to know, because if you don't know where your attention always migrates, like what you focus on determines what you miss, right?
Ooh. That's good. Say that again. Say that again.
Well, where you focus your attention will determine what you miss around you, right? So if your attention is always going toward the same thing, you are missing a lot of data in the environment, and you're missing a lot of information that you would be better off having, right? Except that you're just riveted to certain things, right? So, for example, when your dad walks into a room, if your dad is an 8, so typically when an 8 walks into a room, an 8's attention immediately goes toward who has the most power in this room. Who's in charge here? Right. I want to know who's in charge, and I want to engage with that authority figure or whoever's in charge. I want to figure out, is that person trustworthy? If they're not trustworthy, if there's nobody in charge, I'm going to take charge. And what your dad is often trying to do is, if he's an 8, is to assert strength and control over others in the environment in order to mask vulnerability and weakness in himself.
I'm not just saying this because you've just described that, but there's no question in my mind that my dad is an 8.
So now when you walk into a room, if you're a 3, and we're operating with that assumption, your attention tends to migrate toward a couple of different things. One is, what needs to get done here? Like what's the goal? What's the objective? What's the task? Let me do it. Let me get it done. So it's about productivity and efficiencies. And how can I do it like the quickest, right? Because I got other stuff I got to get done.
Yes, that.
Right.
What is the, like, when someone takes their time doing a job, I'm like, there are 9 steps you're doing that you should just cut out of this process.
Yeah. Right. So the other thing you're thinking about is, what is the impression that I'm making on this room? So you can walk into a room and you can read it like a book. Like you are picking up on people's clothing, their postures, their gestures, what kinds of feelings they're radiating, what do they value, and you're like, how do I have to become myself a person who embodies everything that you hold as being the most important thing, right? And you can actually sort of shape shift and adapt and become for others what you think they want you to become in order to win their love and admiration.
Are you familiar with On-Site? The intensive program? Yeah. So I just, the day before yesterday, got back from my first intensive.
Wow. Right, the Living Centered program.
That's right. And so all of these concepts of, even walking into a room, how you're perceived. Is it fair to say, because this is something that my counselor was very interested in, she was naturally interested in family dynamics because me working with my family and all the rest of it. But she was also interested in levels of codependent behavior. Does a personality type have more? Is a personality type like a 3, for instance, who walks into a room and then naturally like, what do people think? How do I organize this room? How do I shape shift myself to fit this room? All the rest of it. Are there certain personalities like a 3 that are more prone to codependent behaviors?
Well, it's a good question. And the problem is that the term codependent is such a broad bucket now. It can mean people pleasing. It can mean enmeshment. It can mean all kinds of different things. So it's now such a generalized term with different definitions. If by that you mean when are there types that are dependent on people pleasing or approval seeking? Yeah, for sure. There are certain types that are more driven in that direction. 2s, for example, 9s, for example, albeit they do it differently, right? The way that they do it. But I oftentimes find with 3s are a little bit more reading the room. It's almost like there's a question in their eyes sometimes with 3s, and I can see the question being asked. And the question is, do you love me yet? Have I won you over yet? Do you love me? Am I
I'm
good?
I'm not going to say that hits home, but that might hit home a little bit.
Yeah. And so sometimes it's interesting, Joel, like sometimes with men, this is an experience I've had with men 3s, and I've worked with a lot of coaching with a lot of men 3s. Usually like in the corporate space, some artists, but mostly in the corporate space. And they are some of the most powerful people in their industries, and yet I can see this little boy in their eyes. And the little boy is almost as if looking for almost a parental, if not a father approval sign from the other. And it's just interesting to watch, like, and I try to get them in touch with that, who that is inside them, like that is still in search of that validation, because I think at their core, 3s aren't sure that they're valuable or worthwhile, right? And so there's always this look for validation. Am I being validated? Are you punching my ticket right now, or are you not punching my ticket? Who do I have to become in order for you to punch my ticket? So it's like this constant striving for validation and approval, and it can be masked as indifference to what you think, right? But actually, that I can still see the small boy. It's like, no, I still see it. It's still in play.
Anthony?
Yes.
With my busy schedule, I'm always looking for ways to carve out some time for myself. One way I've been able to save time is through Thrive Market. I no longer have to make a trip to the grocery store, bro, and stand in long checkout lines to get what I need. Instead, I can take my dogs for a walk while the groceries get delivered straight to my door.
Love it.
And I know I'm getting the highest standards in the industry. Thrive Market only allows trusted, top quality ingredients while restricting 1,000 plus harmful ingredients like artificial flavors, high fructose corn syrup, GMOs, and more. Whether I'm looking for certified dairy-free products, dye-free alternatives, or high-protein essentials, Thrive has our family covered with the click of a button.
Oh man, not only do I save time with Thrive Market, but I also save money on every single order. On average, I save over $33 each time I shop. For example, I saved 40% on Ora Bora sparkling water and Kodiak's protein-packed blueberry muffin mix.
And our listeners can get the same deal too, Anthony. Save time and money by getting it all in one place with Thrive Market today. Go to thrivemarket.com/typology for 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/typology. thrivemarket.com/typology.
Wow, that's good. I was hoping to wait until the end for you to settle the score on what number I am, but I think you just, as you've done many times before, Ian, you just read my mail, so we can move on now. We've solved it.
But here's what's interesting, Joel. So here's what's interesting, right? Just because I know your Enneagram type doesn't mean I know you, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, true.
Like your type tells me, it gives me some interesting probabilities, right? Like I can say to myself, if you said to me I'm a 3, I'd be like, okay, so in my interactions with you, the following patterns are probable, not certain, but they're probably going to show. I would just say that what's really interesting to me is, like, so you've made this movie, right? And I've written a memoir, which is a little bit like writing the screenplay of your life. Okay. And I was thinking to myself, I'm wondering what interesting things you learned. Well, let me ask you even more broadly. Like, what are you learning about yourself these days that both surprises you or delights you or upsets you?
Well, I think the film is actually a typology perfect sort of, framework to chat about, because, for those of you who don't know about it, the film is literally, it's my parents and my family story. So, and I opted, speaking of, enmeshments and dynamics in father and son and whatnot, I offered to play my dad in the film. I was like, I know this guy, I've done a bit of acting before. And so, and my parents are both still with us. And it was just a fascinating, when you sign up for this sort of thing, I'm sure it's like when you started, like, I'm going to write a book. You're like, okay, you start off, it seems glorious and it seems funny and it seems fun, right? And then you start getting under the hood and you're like, oh my Lord, this is serious business. So, we said, let's make a film about our family. We've talked about it for years. We've shared our family story at live shows with the band as part of sort of a pay it forward child sponsorship moment. And so people come and said, you should write a book. And we said, you know what, we're homeschooled. We don't read and write very well, jokingly, obviously, but we'll give you one better. We'll make a movie. And so I dove into the script with the screenwriter. I co-directed the film, played our dad in the film, and then was part of, through the band, releasing, both literally releasing and proverbially releasing the film and the family to the world. And we also didn't try to hold back on dynamics. We didn't try to hold back on personalities and family dynamics and failure and pride and insecurity and all of these layers. And you mentioned the word delight. I am, by and large, awfully delighted at the process. And I felt the kindness of God so at so many points along the way, because there were a plethora of points where family members, crew members, actors, studios, that the thing could have just fallen off the rails, and there could have been so much disruption. And so I didn't even quantify the amount of disruption that there could be. And yet we've come out the other side. It was released in theaters April 26th of this year in the United States, and it's slowly kind of releasing around the world in theaters. And I'm pleased to announce that not only do I feel like our family is still intact, but I believe we're actually better for it. And speaking of therapy and intensive and of understanding, like, I really believe I understand, particularly my dad, in a way that I never have before, after literally dropping into his shoes, or more precisely his jacket, because it was his literal jacket that I wore during the filming.
What is it you feel like if you had to name, like, the biggest aha for what you understand about your dad that you didn't before the film, what would that be?
I can't speak on behalf of every son or daughter. I can only speak for myself. But I will confess, Anthony, that I have been very lazy with my parents' story, particularly my dad's story, because it really follows dad losing everything in Australia and mum and dad moving to the United States with a job offer and then losing that job and 6 kids and one on the way and no visa issues and whatnot. And I just approached it like a kid at the time. I was like, this is an adventure, we're going to America. This is the land of the movies and Disney World and all the rest of it. And so as a result, now, as I mentioned, I work with my dad a lot and most of my life, in fact. And so there were things he would do that were obviously a response to some either pain or hurt or whatnot throughout the years. And I would just be frustrated. I'd just be like, man, I'd be like, why? This is just silly. Why would you respond that way? And yet, in co-writing this film with Richard Ramsey and then dropping into his character and literally visualizing, expressing, and living out the most traumatic, what he would tell you is the most traumatic period of his life. I got to flip the script, so to speak, and see him from a man who's roughly his age now. And my depth of empathy for him, nothing has changed. Like, I mean, I think it's been impacting for him to see the film, obviously, but for all intents and purposes, nothing has changed in our dynamic, and yet everything has changed. And it was just embodying him, enacting him in this film,
It's so interesting because, like I said, here was my experience after writing a memoir, right? So I came from a sort of, a very complicated, troubled family, right? Every family is complicated. This one was complicated by addictions and all kinds of other things that were really extracurricular complicators. But when you tell the story of a family, what you don't bank on, what you don't anticipate, number one, is how everyone's going to respond, right? That's one thing. Sounds like you all have navigated that pretty well, though I'm sure there were plenty of bumps, right? Like that surprises you. But it's what comes up inside of you as you do this work, right? That's the thing that surprised me.
Yeah.
What all the retelling of the story and I remember at one time saying to my wife, I feel like I'm walking through an emotional minefield wearing clown shoes, like I'm just stepping on landmines everywhere, like just like insights and realizations and like, oh shit, like, oh my gosh, like, I didn't see that, or I didn't anticipate this, or because the narrative retelling of what we think has made us will bring to the surface things in us that we didn't know were there, which can be very disruptive and unsettling in our souls, in our hearts, So as I said that, you had a very physical reaction, like, yes. Tell me what has that been like for you, man? Like because I cannot describe to people how intense this is.
Yeah. There's something about not only intention. I mean, we set intentions every day, right? But action following intention. In fact, one of the things the counselor said at Onsite this last weekend, she said, good intention equals good action equals good feelings. Bad intention equals bad action equals bad feelings. But so often we try and flip it around. We're like, good feelings equal good intentions equal good actions. And she was like, it's backwards. We've got it backwards. So for me, setting this intention of, I'm going to make a project that's going to be not a glory project, but an honor project for my parents and what they walked through and the faith-filled nature, particularly my mum during that time. And then the action of it has led me to the feeling of it now. And I'm so glad that I literally got to live out intention into action into feeling, because I set the intention for the film. You set the intention for the memoir. Then you get into the action of the film. And like you said, you're like, oh no, I'm Ronald McDonald incarnate right here. Just a clown in red shoes. And then fortunately, you get to the other side. And in both cases, your memoir was well received. The film was well received. And there's this feeling. But even if it wasn't, there would be this feeling of like, gee whiz, it's revelation is what it is. It's literal revelation. Like I said to someone the other day, I said, go back to when we September 2022 and shove a stake in the ground of my timeline and say there is a before and after of Joel Smallbone from October, November 2022 onward.
So articulate for me what the major revelation is that you have had about yourself as a result of the retelling of this story as you understood it, and how it will change and how it will move you to be different in the world now.
Well, let's take the intention, action, feeling trio a little further. You said it well earlier when we talked about my type. I walk into a room and I have a certain intention, a posture as I walk into the room. My intention after the film, I've walked into my dad's life, my mum's life, a lot of people, my wife's life in 2017, as I mentioned, and I've gone, I'm going to impart on you Joel Smallbone's psychology, emotional state, personality type, etc. on you. And if you act outside my framework of morality, spirituality, vocation, emotion, I am my own sort of barometer. And what the film has done for me is inverted the narrative. And it's gone, well, hang on. Yeah, you're not quite as awesome as you maybe thought you were. And oh, hang on, there's other people's stories. And hang on, there's other people's perspectives. And hang on, you actually are walking in as not only as a sum of a marriage family, you're walking into life inside a family of origin, walking into a life as an Australian American. Like there's all of these criterias around my life that it just feels more nuanced. It's kind of what you said after the memoir. It's like, and again, my perspective has inverted. So instead of walking into the room, simply sitting going, who are you? Who are all you in relation to me? I'm almost arguably saying, who am I in relation to you?
Just a few years ago, only 3% of domestic violence shelters accepted pets, meaning many abuse survivors had to choose between staying in a difficult situation for their pet or leaving their pet behind. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience domestic abuse in their lifetime, and nearly half of survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina believes in the healing power of pets, particularly for survivors of abuse. They believe pets and people are better together, which is one of the many reasons they started the Purple Leash Project. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping break down one of the many barriers abuse survivors face, the lack of pet-friendly domestic violence shelters. Purina has helped increase the amount of pet-friendly shelters across the country from 3% to nearly 20% through the Purple Leash Project. With more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters, survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to get involved.
The following ad is sponsored by Pets Best Insurance Services. Your pet is your bestie. Your therapist, your preferred match. It's easy to love them, even when they sneak your snacks. It's easy to protect them, too, with pet insurance coverage from Pets Best. Because it's all fun and games until they chew on something they shouldn't. With perfect timing, Pets Best helps protect your furry friend and your budget from this imperfect world. Get up to 90% on eligible vet bills for less than $1 a day. Find your perfect match at PetsBest.com. Pet insurance products offered and administered by Pets Best Insurance Services, LLC, are underwritten by American Pet Insurance Company or Independence American Insurance Company. For all terms, visit PetsBest.com/policy.
Yes. So I love this because I think that's what 2 things came to mind as you were speaking. One is just that the aperture of the lens is for you has opened and has more space now to recognize the experience of others, right? And one of my mantras when I work with people is very simply, it is a big mistake to presume that your way of seeing the world is normal, right? Because that means every time you meet someone with a different way of seeing the world, if it's different than yours, you will feel justified in judging them abnormal.
Yeah.
Right? If you just think yours is the only way of seeing the world, right? So, like, that's a big mistake, right? And if the Enneagram is right, and it's right enough, it's not perfect, but it's right enough, okay?
Right.
Then there's actually 9 normal ways of seeing the world, not just yours, right? And I just think part of emotional and spiritual growth is the capacity to recognize the complexities in the kinds of energies we exchange with other people. And then the ability with equanimity and with a core sense of self to stand back from our own experience, to observe with a non-blaming gaze what is happening in the moment, and to be honest, open, and willing. HOW. I'm always saying how to myself, right? Am I honest? Am I open? And am I open-minded? And am I willing, in this moment to receive what's coming and what is here for me, beyond what I normally would have habitually done with it,
And by the way, it seems as though this is a better way to live. Am I wrong? Like a happier, more joyful.
Oh my gosh. Yes. But here's the danger. Yes, it is. But let's be honest. So it's also a more vulnerable way to live. So meaning, here's just a little cookie Enneagram 4 Latin lesson. We have 2 words, right? One is the word pusillanimous, and pusillanimous is like this thorny, defended posture against the world. We get the word pugilist, right? Like fighter from it, right? Like it's like, so it's a very defended posture, right? Versus the word magnanimous, which means big soul, right? Which is this open-armed posture. No one can see me, but I'm opening my arms up like this, right? So it's an open heart. So magnanimity, to be magnanimous means to have a big soul, to have a big heart, lots of space in it, right? I think that our personalities in some ways could largely be described as ways that we've learned to navigate the world to get our needs met, and they're largely adaptive strategies and little games that we play to get our stuff met, right? And when we move from that pusillanimous sort of fighter posture to by the way, we would call this a cruciform posture, right?
Wow.
An open-hearted, cross-like posture, right? This is the Christ on the cross, the Christocentric kind of like a Christo posture. What we're saying is, yes, I'm opening my heart to the fact that I'm not the only person in this room having an experience right now. There's all kinds of other people in this room having an experience of this moment, and they may be very different from mine. And but when we open ourselves and we relax the posture of the games that our personalities play and open our arms and to expose our hearts, you're also going to get your ass kicked. So yes, it is a better, more beautiful way to live your life. Yes, it is a more emotionally wise, spiritual way to be in the world. And if Jesus is any model for us, then we should know that the moment you live like that, you could get killed.
Wow.
And it could hurt.
Well, it feels like it's so otherworldly, the concept of living from it's in I mean, is this not the upside down kingdom? Is this not, what it means to live according to another way, right?
Well, it is precisely another way. And also let's just talk about it from an artistic perspective. Many people write great songs from this posture. Okay. You can write a great song from this posture, but you can write something epic from this posture. Right? Like when you write a song from this place.
Yeah.
Right? When you write a book or make a movie from this place, and for those of you who can't see me, my arms are open wide, like almost like in a Christ-like cruciform posture. When you write from this place and live from this place, yes, the danger is high, the vulnerability is great, and the dangers are real, and yet this is where all the good stuff happens. Yeah. This is where all the good stuff happens. You can be clever here, right? Like so I don't want to, this is an unfair thing to say, but I can tell, I think, when an artist is in this kind of radically self-donating posture, right? You're right, and you are open to everything around you. And I can tell other times when someone is good at their craft, and this is the difference between genius and clever, right? I've met many clever artists, but very few geniuses.
And the difference between true inspiration that will shift someone else's heart. Because let's face it, what are we trying to get at here with all of this? Personality types, a song, a film. Like, I love the arts because it has a way of bypassing the head and going straight to the heart of a human. But if you don't sort of, like you said, just sort of rip open your own heart, sort of like that, ripping off the Superman, logo off your chest and open yourself up in art, I was sort of ventured to say, what's the point? One, and with no judgment attached, because I've been in this box as well. Every artist hops in that box sometimes and hops back, the clever box, and hops back out. But how sad in the end,
Yeah, well, the key is to know when you're in the box and how to get out of it.
Yeah.
The older you get, I guess, I'm only speaking from my experience, right? Like, the older I get, the quicker I have become at knowing when I'm operating in a place of low self-awareness, when I'm just being clever instead of, when I'm being pusillanimous versus magnanimous, when I'm being, hiding behind my personality versus living authentically in the world. I've just been around myself long enough to know when I'm when I'm co-signing my own BS.
Yeah, and it's important, right? Because when fear kicks in, or insecurity, and you're going into a room to create with others, and the intention and the instinct is to default to that closed, protected state, to be aware enough. The goal is to have awareness so that I'm in this place and I have the option, as opposed to people that aren't even aware. I have the option now to open my heart up, to open my stance up, so I can receive and participate in creating beauty.
Well said.
One of the saddest bits about it is that it can work, and what I mean by that is the clever, closed posture. Not only can it work, but people can go like, "That's amazing." And then this is what's dangerous about the arts and dangerous about literature, and is that you're modeling a posture. So you're modeling a posture of openness or a posture of close. You're modeling cleverness or inspiration, heart connect or head connect. And then you create these little, the Despicable Me minions in some, everyone else sort of follows what Mr. Gru did, you create these little, for those that are prescribed to your podcast or your reading or, my Spotify profile, like, they go, well, if it's good enough for him or her, well, maybe it's good enough. And I think we've just touched on the great responsibility of the artist, because both people respond to both, and it's a challenge to stay in the open crucifix posture for sure.
And some people are just almost at some weird way at some young age, are able to nail it. And they're able to navigate living in that posture without self-destructing, because it's fraught with danger, actually, for an artist. And some artists, are tapped into something, and that is bigger than them. And sometimes the feelings and the vulnerability of it can all come crashing down on them, and it can end very poorly,
Yeah.
I was, as you were thinking, I was thinking about, there are so many clever artists, and I like a good clever artist. There's nothing wrong with a clever song, right? I mean, it's clever and it was well written and it was what all the things that we associate with a good song, right? Like it was hooky, it grabbed me, it was great. And then, an artist, like I was thinking the other day about this song. I don't know how we got into music here. I want to go back to personality in a second. However, this is important. Like there's a song by an artist named Iris Dement, and she writes this song called "When My Morning Comes Around." Do you know that song by any chance, Joel?
No.
When My Morning Comes Around. It's a great title, right? But she's actually writing about so many things, actually. The song has no chorus. It has no bridge. It's just 3 verses. And she sings, not only that, but whenever Iris Dement opens her mouth, like Kentucky falls out. It's like, you're like, whoa, like you are actually speaking on behalf of like a whole geographical area of the world, And but in the final lyric of the song, she goes, "When my morning comes around, it's from a new cup I'll be drinking. And for once I won't be thinking there's something wrong with me. And I'll wake up to find that my faults have been forgiven. And that's when I'll start living, when my morning comes around." And I thought, good golly, how old were you when you wrote that? Like it's there's such a, like, there's some unnameable thing happening there. And what it is the only way I can use this phrase again is she is radically donating herself to us in that moment. As if she is placing she is placing her own life on the altar for us to banquet at, right? And to resonate with and to be nourished by. That is a very profound, beautiful, beautiful thing. And very interestingly, boy, I'm going off the trail here, Anthony. In the early church, one of the earliest symbols of Jesus is as a pelican. Because the pelican actually wounds itself to feed its own children its own blood.
Wow.
Yeah, to nourish its own children. And in a way, that's what good art does, right? It's almost like a self-wounding. It's like a way of wounding the self to share out, right? And that's both what makes it intoxicating and beautiful and dangerous, right? You have to make sure that you do that wisely and not bleed out in the process of trying to.
That's it. To wounding yourself. It sounds backwards to say, but wounding yourself in the appropriate measure, expressing yourself in the appropriate measure. Because you're right. There is the version of the art that is like, I will lay thyself on the railroad tracks and I will be killed on behalf of my art. And it's like, well, that doesn't do anyone. It doesn't do you good or your audience good if you're actually just dead. How do you appropriately, without being a masochist either, without getting to this point of going like, I kind of like the pain, it's like, that's not the point either. I've never heard it put quite like that, but I heartedly agree. I really do.
So you've just come back from on-site, and so you are probably been raked over fairly well. And what I'm curious to know is how do you want to be in the world differently today than you were before you went?
One of the exercises she had me do was draw a picture for every year of my life so far. And I am a terrible drawer.
Perfect.
Yeah. Stick figures. Ian, I was so bad that one of the pictures when I was 2, I drew it, and then the next day we left it, and she posted them all on the wall. And then the next day we came back to it, and I spent 5 minutes trying to decode my own picture that I had just drawn about what it actually meant. It was so bad. But anyway, the exercise was actually really helpful in the end, because I was a very conscientious boy, a very kind, very conscientious little chap, and I love that. The little version of Joel, the 6-year-old version of me, this middle child, one of 7 in Australia. There's this picture of me because we wear uniforms in Australia with the navy blue brimmed hat and the little insignia and the whole thing. And I'm like, I love that guy. But we laid out these drawings, if you want, if you could be generous and call them that, on the wall. And she kind of had me go through, and I got to about 30, and I was like, you know what? And there's that, and 30 for me is when I'd lived most of my life in relative obscurity. 30 for me was when I had met the love of my life, Mariah, and this band that I'm part of for King Country had started sort of turning the corner after many years of being in the dark and failure. I think I turned to the little boy version of me and I said, hey, I can't hang out with you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be fun. I can't be free. I need to be pretty serious because this is all serious business now. Like, this is marriage, and this is this band, and a lot of all the things. A lot of people are depending on me, and I've got an audience, and very important things that we all tell ourselves, and some of them very valid. And so one of the things that was very tangible for me was I need to re-engage. It's just to laugh more and actually physically be aware of him. Like, check in with him. Hey, how are you feeling about today? And it's actually, even Mariah said to me, I've only been home for 48 hours, but it's just like, and maybe it's the afterglow, but I've just been laughing more. And I mean, look, we could have a whole other podcast about, the revelations of this weekend. But that was one that really stuck with me, and I'm proud. I'm proud to say that I've sort of aiming to pull him close again and spend more time with him.
Oh man, I'm delighted to hear it. I think so much of, how would I say this? So this isn't original to me, but I can't remember the author that said it. It was a fiction writer. But he said something to the effect of, we spend half our lives running away from home. The first half of our life we spend running away from home, and the second half of our life trying to find our way back.
Yeah.
And that's true. That rings true in my experience. Yeah. And so much of it, right, is not so much a claiming, but a reclaiming of who we are. Because right, it's inevitable that in our lives, particularly in that first half, that we amputate parts of who we are and exile them to the shadows where we don't have to see them anymore because it's just not safe to be that connected. That's why when people say, I just feel connected, it's like, to what? Right? It's like, well, to that guy is what you're saying, right? So much of, I think, the spiritual journey is about rescuing from the shadows of our lives parts of ourselves that we amputated to survive, or what we thought we needed to do to survive, and to reintegrate and welcome them home and say, you're safe with me now. I had a wild dream the other night. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, you go. I want to hear about it. All right. But don't forget about your wild dream.
Okay.
So, to your point, and as an immigrant, as someone who moved from Australia to America, who started his own family now, and I just, this is another little fascinating crossroads too. I just turned 40. So I depict my dad, actually his 40th birthday, which was his great loss was on his 40th birthday in Australia. I just turned 40 releasing this film. So there's all these little, obviously, cross connects of my life and looking back at his journey, looking back at the younger version of me, even down to this last weekend with Onside. But it feels like that first half of life, you're right. It's all about identity. It's all about energy and striving and who are you going to be? What are you going to do? Who are you going to love? What are you going to believe? And there's it's a necessary adventure. There's perils and there's pitfalls and there's pirates and you go out into the great unknown and you explore. And then at some point you go, oh, gee, like you well said, I've gotten so far away from that 6-year-old version of myself. I've gotten so far away from that joy and that simplicity. I've learned all these things. Yes, was he naive? Of course he was. Yes, had he not experienced the world? Of course he hadn't. But actually, he wasn't as far off in his original version as we might have thought he was. And so I'm excited about the road back to me, if you
All
will.
right. Yeah, well, why not? I mean, what you just described is and I love this way of thinking about it, is that the first half of life is like the parable of the talents, right? It's all about digging up the gifts we've been given, making dividends on them, crushing, and if we don't do it, we're going to get in trouble. I got to, and I got to strive. But the second half of life needs to change, right? To being about the parable of the prodigal son. It's about coming home. It's about forgiveness. It's about acceptance. It's about you move from being a person that is, and this is a good way to end on a 3, right? From someone who's doing to being, right?
Yeah.
Like the emphasis is on who am I, not on what am I doing, and how am I doing, but who am I being and who am I becoming? And am I becoming a person that is able to fully integrate and accept all of me and to bring that to the world, versus some curated, image managed version of myself in the first half,
Yeah.
So beautiful. Joe, we could go on forever, and we can't because time will not permit this. However, I hope our paths do run into each other in Nashville at some point. And thanks for being on with us, man. What a joy.
You have to tell me your dream before. And I have one final question to ask you. I'm going to put you on the spot, but just tell me
All
your
right.
wild dream.
All right. Oh, well, okay. So the other night, about maybe 10 days ago, I was kind of in that state of sort of half wakefulness in sleep, but in and out of a dream state. And I realized that I was sitting next to a little boy on a bench somewhere, but the little boy was mostly in a shadow. So I actually couldn't actually see him with complete clarity. And then I realized very, very quickly that it was my 5-year-old self. I just knew it. I was like, that is me at 5. And I know that there was a tow-headed little boy sitting there because I could sort of half see the right side of his face. And I wanted to, I'm a therapist, man. I'm like, oh, it's my 5-year-old self. It must be in my shadow, and I must talk to it and communicate with it. And suddenly I realized that all this boy was asking me to do was to hold his hand. That's all I was being asked to do. So every time I started to talk, I was like, don't say a word, just take the kid's hand. So I held this boy's hand for about 5 minutes in the stream, or what felt like 5 minutes in the stream. And I just marveled, this is weird, at the texture, the smallness of his hand and the texture of the skin on his hand. And I just sort of sat there, look at me, I got ink on my hands, but just gently sort of thumb massaging the hand of this small boy next to me. And then spent some really wonderful time journaling about this, because I think those moments are visitations.
Yeah.
I think that's a visitation. I don't think that's just a psychological burp, at 2 a.m. I think that was a visit from that 5-year-old version of me, as if saying to me, and I actually took it as a compliment, as if maybe I have arrived at a place in my life now where that child actually feels I'm safe enough, and that I won't shame him, or push
leave
him
him
back into or leave him. Yeah. So that's what struck me when you were sharing that story, and it's,
I love that. I will I'll hang on to that picture because that actually gives me more language to, as a newly, freshly, legitimately confirmed 3 wing 4 on the Enneagram. My first proclivity with my 6-year-old self is to just take him on a wild adventure. Be like, I'm going to impress you, little guy, so much. I'm going to hang out with you so much that you're not going to know what to do with yourself. I'm going to perform for you. You're going to love me. And instead, that simplicity of all of it, the park bench, the quiet, the smaller palm of his hand in mine, and the presence and the being instead of the doing. I'll take that with it. I'll take that with me. I just need to be with him because it's funny because I literally have set out the last 48 hours like I'm going to show this kid what a good time looks like. And so this is a good. I was going to be a human doing with my 6-year-old self, So this is good, and I agree with you. This is great. My final question to you, Ian, is: when I read that book in 2018 out loud on the beach in Noosa, Australia, to my wife, word for word, page for page, and when I finished it, and I saw that you were in town, I thought to myself, I would really love to take that guy to coffee one day. And so my request is, and just one date. That's all I'm asking. Just one time. And then
just one date.
Just one date. And if you like it, we can have a second date. But can I just take you to coffee one time after this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would think it would be a blast.
I would enjoy it. Some of my favorite humans and the people that I have had the most grounded creative moments with and actually relational moments with are fours. Not to put myself out there too much, but I'm just want you to know that.
Every Enneagram 4 songwriter in Nashville just wrote that down and are now trying to find ways to get a hold of you. So just so you know, you've just sealed your fate.
There you go.
Phil, again, what a delight to have you on and to spend time with you. And I feel, I always sort of measure things somatically. And so right now I feel like I've had 10 espressos and I feel satisfied and nourished and wonderful inside, as I trust everyone listening does as well. And to all of you listening, remember these words: may you have love, may you have joy, may you have peace, may you have healing, and may you have rest. Until next time.